The bombs have dropped. The EMPs have gone off. And the world is a white line nightmare. Join me and my guest for the Post-Apocalyptic Movie Geek Out Part 2.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. Part of my mission is to help game masters cut down their prep time. I do that by writing resource books. You can find those at dicegeeks.com. Now today, we continue our post-apocalyptic movie geek out. Those of you who listen to the show regularly know I am a fan of post-apocalyptic movies like the Mad Max movies, especially ones from the 80s. I wanted to talk about these with somebody else who is a big fan because I think understanding stories is critical to becoming a better game master and even a better role player. So we dive into some post-apocalyptic movies. Let's just jump into the interview. My guest today is the co-founder of Crypt Monkey Games, Ty Rucker. Ty, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me back again.
No problem. It is a pleasure speaking to you always. And we had to finish our romp through post-apocalyptic movies, so we couldn't leave it as a part one. So we're going to have our part two today. So thank you for coming back on the show and geeking out with me over fun post-apocalyptic movies.
Yeah, it's such a big subject. I'll be surprised if we get through the second part of our list.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. And then, of course, I was even looking through our list, and I had left off so many that we could still even talk about. There are so many of these movies. Hollywood just seems to be fascinated with post-apocalyptic movies, and probably for good reason, because it seems like they do have a lot of fans. Now, if somebody is out there listening and they haven't heard the first part of our movie discussion, that's okay. You can listen to it out of order, but I would encourage you to check that out. I will put a link to that first episode in the show notes to this one at dicegeeks.com, so you can check that out. And what we're doing, just to kind of remind everybody, is we're just going through really any type of movie that can be considered post-apocalyptic, and we're discussing those. We're going through them chronologically. So I think we left off in 1987, so we'll pick up in 1987 and continue on from there. I guess just a little bit for listeners out there, a lot of these movies are not family friendly. The podcast is. Our discussion will be fine if you're listening in the car or your kids are around. But don't... Probably none of these movies you should just probably sit down with your kids unless they're 22 years old or something.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah. But they are fun movies. And so we're just going to go ahead and dive back in. So like I said, we were picking up with these movies in chronological order. So we're diving back in to 1987 with a movie called Survivor. This is one that I had added to the list. Ty, have you ever heard of this movie?
I have not heard of it.
I am not surprised. This is one of those movies that, except for a very light IMDb page and poster art, and the fact that I have seen it a couple of times, it is just hard to even find that this movie even had, existed at some point in history. It is kind of the classic, as we were talking a lot about in the first part of our post-apocalyptic movie discussion. It is kind of a classic Mad Max ripoff kind of style movie. And it was kind of a staple back in the days when me as a kind of a young teenager would rifle through all of the movies in a video store because I had seen everything. And then I was looking for other movies. Some of the movies that we're talking about in this list, require a certain taste to be enjoyed. So I can't really say that this was a good movie, but it did have some interesting points to it. And one of those was that it kind of picks up on this theme that we find in some post-apocalyptic movies, that our main character is an astronaut, and he watches kind of the nuclear destruction of Earth, from orbit. So he's in orbit and he's watching like kind of the nuclear destruction, the war happen on Earth. And then when his pod comes back to Earth, he is confronted with all this devastation and all this destruction. And it had some interesting set pieces too. They film in kind of a wrecked ship that has it is just wrecked on this beach, and the bottom has rusted out. So there's like a pool kind of in the bottom of it. And it was kind of interesting set pieces. But the movie is a bit slow, and there's a lot of kind of narration through it. And the plot is pretty simplistic, but it had some neat ideas. I actually think some of the ideas are neat. The idea of the astronaut kind of gets picked up in a number of the movies, post-apocalyptic movies, and that I guess the main character was played by Chip Meyer, whose most famous role was playing Vance Duke when Bo and Luke left the show, I guess, and then the villain was played by Richard Mall, who was Bull on Night Court, the really tall bald guy, and Richard Mall was actually in Metal Storm, a movie we talked about in the other episode.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like so The Aftermath was one of the ones you talked about before, and I found that one and went back and watched it because Sid Haig's the bad guy there, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And that had the astronaut thing going with that one too. Yeah. That's kind of I don't know. There's a number of these kind of Mad Max ripoffs that pick up on that astronaut kind of idea. Either the astronaut watches, or they return to Earth and to find it just totally destroyed. Which is kind of that is an interesting concept. And I guess that's probably why it gets picked up a few times in some of these movies. Yeah, it's the surprise. The world isn't the same thing. Like, I know we're not talking about television shows, but The Walking Dead, you wake up in the hospital, or, there's a zombie apocalypse and nobody's around, and surprise factor.
Yeah, I agree. It does give you that surprise, kind of like, I guess even Planet of the Apes, like we talked about last time, the first one, where they land and they think they're on a different planet, but there's always some kind of shock or surprise. So that is one way to have a person who just doesn't know about the war or something, is to have them not be on Earth and have them land and realize that foolishly we have destroyed ourselves.
Yeah. 28 days later, that used the hospital way of doing that as well. I don't think we talk about that one, but
no, we didn't talk about that.
Could easily have gone on this list as well.
Yeah, that one could have. I actually really like that one. I haven't put that one on the list. But yeah, so that is the movie Survivor. If anybody out there could watch this movie, I would be shocked, because I don't know if it's a copy of it exists anywhere. Maybe somebody out there somewhere has a copy of it.
Well, I found the Aftermath, so I'm going to try to find the Survivor now.
Okay. All right. Now, like I said, be warned. It's not Mad Max. Has some problems, but for somebody who loves post-apocalyptic movies, it scratches that itch while still having not the best execution, let's just say. And it's funny because I say that, and I had tried being a filmmaker. I'm kind of an erstwhile filmmaker, and I actually wrote and directed a post-apocalyptic movie some years back in the early 2000s. And I nearly broke myself, like physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like trying to make a movie that was barely watchable. So I give people a lot of latitude. Making a movie is a very difficult difficult thing. And if you can pull off something, hey, I'm with you. So I find it hard to sometimes just criticize too glibly when I know how hard it is to actually pull off a feature film.
Yeah, I think those of us that are into this genre anyway, we're pretty good at suspending our disbelief, because it's usually a lot about the story. It's a lot more about the story than it is, how effective the laser guns seemed on screen.
Yeah, or about, frankly, sometimes it's about the cool cars or the outfits or the, like you were just saying, kind of that basic concept. So the basic concept of Survivor is an astronaut returns to Earth and finds it destroyed. That's a pretty cool concept.
Right. It's the world that those of us that are silly enough want to live in.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've talked about Survivor a little bit. So let's move on to another one. This was another one that I had put on the list. This is Spirits of. Let me try this again. It is a complicated title. Mm-hmm. Spirits of the Air, Gremlins of the Sky. It is from the year 1989. Had you ever heard or seen this one, Ty?
No, and with that title, I think I'd remember that.
Yeah. Very unusual title. This movie comes out of Australia. It was directed by Alex Proyas. I think that's how you say his last name. I think it was either a student film or his capstone to a master's degree program or something. But this movie got him the job of directing The Crow, which I am sure you probably have seen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this started, this movie led to Alex Proyas's Hollywood career, and he's gone on to direct, I, Robot, The Crow, as I mentioned, I, Robot, what was it? Something else. It was kind of ridiculed, but The Gods of Egypt, I think, was one of his latest movies that he directed.
Yeah, I love that movie.
I'm sorry?
I love that movie.
You love that one? I have not seen it.
I just watched it again recently, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I know it got kind of ridiculed, but I have not seen it. So if Proyas directed it, I'm interested in seeing it. So it's kind of on one of my lists to see. But Spirits of the Air and Gremlins of the Sky. It is. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. Or it was a few months ago. It is a very interesting film. You can tell that he was trying to do a lot with very little that he had at the time. And kind of the premise is that there has been some type of apocalypse, and we never really learn what that is exactly. But there is a brother and sister who live kind of just way out into the Australian outback, and a wanderer comes and wanders out of the desert and kind of disrupts their existence. And the brother is fascinated with flight, and they have kind of throughout the movie, there's always like this very strong wind, and there is banners that are always blowing, and kind of wind chimes and model airplanes and things like this. So he is fascinated with flight, and this wanderer comes in, and they if I'm remembering correctly, it kind of culminates with them building a flying machine. Very strange movie, kind of slow, but it is interesting in a number of different ways. You can really see, I think it's very easy to see why you would send that movie to Hollywood and they would be like, okay, direct a movie for us, because the person really, Proyas really showed that he could do a lot with a little that he was working with at that time.
Yeah, you said he was in Australia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's this thing with Australian post-apocalyptic films. You got Mad Max the Mad Max movies came out of Australia. They're just in touch with that idea. Maybe it's the wasteland of Australia or something is just really akin to that spirit of apocalypse, maybe.
Yeah, and I was wondering that too. That if it's because they're in Australia, there is not a lot of people for a very large amount of land, or that towns perhaps sometimes just dry up and go away because certain types of work or something go away. But yeah, there does seem to be something there, and of course, then you also do have to think. I mean, like coming. Like 10 years after Mad Max, you would have to think that Alex Proyas was influenced by George Miller and Mad Max being like one of the most famous, Australian films and one of the most famous Australian directors.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that land just lends itself to desolation.
Yeah, and it's easy it would be easy to pull off a post-apocalyptic film if you can point the camera in one direction and just see like a huge wasteland of a desert, and where it doesn't rain except every 13 years or something. Right.
Yeah, that's perfect for this genre, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So this movie is interesting. It doesn't have the pace that modern movies have, certainly, but it's definitely worth watching. And like I said, I think it was on Prime just a few months ago. I went back and watched a few scenes of it to kind of remind myself of it. And it's just a very strange movie, but definitely worth checking out if somebody wants to see something odd. It is that. And there also does seem to be, now that you mentioned it about Australia, there does seem to be something, like this fascination of flight as well, because in Road Warrior, you get the gyro captain, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, you have the pilot character. And then in this movie, it kind of really focuses around flight and kind of a very strong winds out of the wasteland. I think there was another movie. Now I'm going to get off on another tangent. I think there was a movie called Slipstream with Mark Hamill in it, but I think it was from the 90s, early 90s as well. And it was all about flight and post-apocalyptic flight. I didn't put that one on the list, but I don't know. I guess maybe because if you can fly, you could travel really far and perhaps find a pocket of some, of civilization where you couldn't just walk there because now the earth is so desolate.
Yeah, trying to find those greener pastures.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we talked about Spirits of the Air and Gremlins of the Sky a bit. The next movie was another one of mine. It's called, at least in America, is called The Blood of Heroes from 1989 as well. It is also called Salute of the Jugger in Australia and some international markets. Have you ever heard or seen this one?
No, got me again.
Wow. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to dominate the first part, I guess, and then you will dominate the last part because I can't seem to watch new movies for some reason. So Blood of Heroes. This one is, it actually has a really good cast. It has Rutger Hauer in the main role. Has Joan Chen, who had just won an Oscar, I think, for either Best Supporting Actress or Best Actress. I can't remember. Has her in it. Has, I'm going to forget. Vincent D'Onofrio, who's become like a huge star. This was like one of his first roles, I believe. And then it was written and directed by David Webb Peoples, who... you may not recognize the name, but you have seen his movies. He wrote the screenplay for Blade Runner. He wrote 12 Monkeys. He wrote Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's amazing Western, Unforgiven. So he was really well known for being a screenwriter. So he got to direct this movie, and his director of photography was David Egby, who was the director of photography on the original Mad Max. And they shot it in Australia again. So we're back in Australia, but they just shot the movie there. What is interesting about this movie is, we kind of have the same kind of desert post-apocalyptic kind of future, living in wastelands, living off the remnants of the old world kind of thing. But instead of Mad Max, where You have cars and things like this. Blood of Heroes focuses on a game or a new sport, I should say. And the sport is called Jugger. And it is kind of a lethal sport where some of the team can have different weapons, and there's one person on the team that has to take a dog skull and use it to score goals, and they cannot carry weapons. And the sport is kind of really defined with different positions for different weapons, and the quick, who cannot hold a weapon, but they're the only person who can touch the dog skull. It is... I like this movie a lot. I know if you go around to some post-apocalyptic movie websites, it usually kind of gets torn up a little bit. I like this one a lot. I mean, Rutger Hauer is just like too cool. I mean, he's just like so cool. And the cast is great. In the sport, what is most fascinating thing about this is this: if you go onto YouTube, you can type in Jugger for the sport, and people have organized leagues and they play this sport, especially in Europe. Germany and Spain have leagues and have teams and have actually like a world championship match. And of course, it's non-lethal. So, it's non-lethal, and they've changed some of the rules just a little bit. But to me, I just find it fascinating that this movie from 1989 has actually spawned a sport, and that you can go watch on YouTube.
Yeah, that's pretty outstanding. I've got to look for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Rutger Hauer, I mean,
yeah,
there's a reason to watch it there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And he is just super cool in this. And there's a lot of other character actors. Like I said, the cast is just great. I think Delroy Lindo is in it as well. I mean, the cast is just fantastic. And it's not the fastest moving post-apocalyptic movie in the world, but I really enjoy it. And then, you should definitely check it out. It's usually available. I think it is on one of the streaming services or something like that. So it's a ton of fun, really. And then, and if you have a night where you're a little bit bored, just go to YouTube and type in Jugger, and you will find some people playing Jugger matches, and they're actually kind of fun to watch too sometimes. All right, so that's Blood of Heroes. It kind of plays on some ideas as well. Like there's kind of the people who live on the surface are really in rough shape, but there's kind of a city that's underground that has kind of survived a little bit more. And there's kind of a rivalry between them and the different Juggers and things. And like I said, I enjoy it. But it gives a little different take on kind of the post-apocalyptic kind of genre. So, and if your movie makes a sport,
mm-hmm.
You're not doing something too terribly wrong. Oh, right. Actually, there actually is a documentary, about an hour-long documentary online on YouTube. It's called I Am Jugger. Oh, wow. I will have to remember. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. The filmmakers of it actually went back and interview David Webb Peoples, who wrote the script and directed it, and they talk about how it spawned this sport, especially in Europe. And it's a pretty fascinating documentary. It's really well put together, even though I think it was just done by amateurs who enjoy playing the game. So I will try to remember to put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. So it's a fun watch.
Yeah. My list just keeps getting bigger and bigger of the things I need to watch.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many movies. And actually, I should say, one of the reasons why I've seen so many of these movies is when I was writing and directing my post-apocalyptic movie, I kind of went back and I tried to watch as many as I could. And it was probably a good year that I spent just I mean, it was just each week I would probably, I was at least watching one or two post-apocalyptic movies for probably almost a good year. And I tried to find as many as I could. I would search online. I joined a few forums that talk about post-apocalyptic movies and found some crazy stuff out there. But so that's why I have tried to hunt a lot of these movies down. And it was funny. It was, like Blood of Heroes, like I was researching it and I had heard about it. And then it was like, I go into the video store and it's like sitting right there on the shelf. I mean, this was, almost 20 years ago, I guess 18 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago. And it's sitting right there. And I was like, how I've picked over this section. Like, how did I miss it? And it's sitting right there. But it's a ton of fun. And at this rate, we're only going to cover like 3 movies, so we've got to move on. The next movie was another one on my list. It's called Robot Jocks, also from 1989. Have you ever seen this one, Ty?
This one I have seen. It was probably the last time I saw it was in the early 90s, so It was more amazing than I'm sure it would be now. I do remember thinking, these mechs are like one upgrade of special effects from the old Sinbad movies, the way that they moved. Mm-hmm. They were sort of laborious and slow, and but it was a neat movie. Yeah.
And as you're pointing out, yes, the mechs are stop motion animation. The stop motion was actually really good. And some interesting things about this movie. So it's post-apocalyptic because there was a nuclear war, and 50 years later, we're still trying to solve our problems with the Soviet Union. So instead of just nuking each other or going to war again, we make huge giant robots that fight in an arena. And so I don't know how that saves resources or anything, but it's cool in a movie. So I'm fine with it. And the screenplay was actually written by Joe Haldeman, who is a novelist who wrote The Forever War, which is considered a sci-fi classic. The one thing that's interesting about this movie is, and I think, looking up online between the director, who is Stuart Gordon, I think that him and Haldeman had 2 different ideas about what kind of movie they were making, and they've said as much online in some interviews, because you will get a scene in Robot Jocks that is awesome, that is powerful. It's like talking about like science fiction stuff that is just like super cool. And then you'll get the next scene will be kind of a cartoony little funny thing, attempt at humor. And you were like, what happened? It's like they were making 2 different movies and each one was trying to do something like completely different. But, Robot Jocks is very enjoyable, and actually a remake of Robot Jocks would probably be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, giant mechs, that usually gets me. If you have a giant robot that I can operate, I want to see that movie.
Yeah. And this was, you said you saw it in the early 90s. This was Robot Jocks kind of made its rounds in the video stores and things in the early 90s. And it is surprising how many people will have actually seen Robot Jocks, even though some don't want to admit it. But yeah, but because it kind of made its rounds in the video stores at that time when, it was about the only giant mech movie out there.
Yeah. I seem to remember it being a couple of times on HBO too. I think it made some.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't have HBO back then, so I was always scouring the 99-cent movie shelf in the video store. This was it was put out by who is it? Charles Band's company. They did Metal Storm. We had talked about that in the first episode of these. And there's a couple movies out there that claim to be sequels. They are not. That was marketing. They just said Robot Jocks 2 and Robot Jocks 3 have nothing to do with that. And it got me to watch them. But man, they are not sequels to Robot Jocks. Yeah. But yeah, Robot Jocks is a ton of fun. The main character, the actor who played the main character is Gary Graham. You've seen it. The TV show Alien Nation. He was the main human cop in the cop partnership. They're the alien human partnership. So he's kind of known to genre fans. I think he was in Star Trek a couple times as a guest actor and things. So he's kind of there. So yeah, Robot Jox. If you like huge robots and post-apocalyptic stuff, check out Robot Jox. And like we mentioned, the stop motion animation is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun watching those there. Do you have any thoughts on Robot Jox, or should we move along?
I think we can move on. I mean, I don't remember it very well. I just remember the animation was cool, and I always loved the old Sinbad.
Oh yeah.
If stop animation comes up now, I want to watch it. It's still fun.
Yeah, I'm actually showing my kids the Sinbad movies right now, and they've loved the first two. We're going to move on to Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger here next, which is the third one. So, but I love the Harryhausen movies, and of course, I interviewed John Walsh, who is the director of the Harryhausen archives. That was my very first episode of the podcast. We talked about Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation movies. So the next one is a movie I kind of just threw in there. You probably have not seen this one. It is Neon City from 1991. Have you seen this one?
I have not seen it, but I actually do remember the TV commercials.
Oh, okay.
The reason I remember is because Vanity was in it, and she was in The Last Dragon, so that was a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't hurt. She was gorgeous. Yeah. So Vanity was in this. Michael Ironside, who has shown up in a couple of post-apocalyptic movies already. He was the good guy in this one, though. He was not the villain. He's the good guy. It also had Lyle Alzado in it, the football player. I think this was his last film before he died. Way too young, obviously. And then it also had the actor Richard Sanders in it, who is most famous probably for playing Les Nessman on WKRP in Cincinnati. And this movie, like I said, I had heard about it some years ago, but I was not able to see it. And now it is, I can't remember if it was on Prime or IMDb TV. And I watched it a few months ago, and because I wasn't able to see it years ago because it wasn't the video release. It just wasn't in the video stores that I went to and stuff, back then. So it kind of has an interesting concept. It was a scientist was doing an experiment trying to stop, some kind of natural disaster, either the global warming or something. They were trying to stop it, but oh no, they made it horribly worse. So the scientist kind of caused this problem. And the main kind of gist of the story is Michael Ironside is a bounty hunter. He has picked up Vanity, or Vanity's character, of course, on as a bounty, and they have to take kind of a long trip on a bus from one outpost city kind of back to the main city to turn her in. And of course we get a whole bunch of intrigue and serial killers and mutants and blinding sunspots and all kinds of things along the way. Frankly, not the greatest movie. A little slow. But again, I think that happens with a lot of these movies. The premise is actually a pretty fun premise, and they were just, again, with a lot of these kind of Mad Max ripoffs. Some of them, of course, were just total exploitation kind of ripoffs, but some of them were actually trying to tell, that had really good premises, and they were trying to really tell some pretty good stories. And this one kind of just felt like one of those where you have a pretty good idea, but you probably did not, they probably spent their money on their cast and then were left with some other things to kind of create, their post-apocalyptic world. And
I think that's going to have to go on my list as well. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it is. There are some bizarre moments. The the character that Richard Sanders plays is kind of a magician, and it's a little silly. There's there was some things that were like, could have been done a little bit better, let's just say. But I like the premise. It was one of the things that was interesting was that it is, even though there are some blinding sunspots occasionally, it's actually very cold. And I thought that was like they're kind of, it's not just all a desert. It's kind of very cold, and that's probably came from them shooting in Idaho or something like that. But it was just instead of just being kind of a straight up desert, it's usually kind of very cold unless there's kind of a blinding sunspot. So that was kind of an interesting take. I think the only kind of the older movie, this one didn't make the list either, and was a movie from the late 70s called Quintet with Paul Newman in it, of all people, where it is a post-apocalyptic world where everything is frozen over. Probably should have had that one on the list, although I'm not as familiar with that one.
But that's going on my list as well.
Oh yeah. That is a very I'm forgetting the director is kind of famous, very famous, but it's more of an art film kind of thing, and it's very slow and cerebral. But I'm trying to think. But yeah, Paul Newman's in it, and he was obviously fantastic. So it's called Quintet, but that didn't make our list. But anyway, I'm off on another tangent. But so we'll move on from Neon City. Like I said, I think it's free to watch on one of the streaming services right now. So we'll move on. So here you get to talk a little bit more because I have not seen the next one. You put down on the list The Stand from 1994. So why don't you tell us a little about The Stand?
Yeah, this was a mini series in the early 90s, and it's still to this day, for me, this is one of the closest movies to a book that I've seen. And I say that even though I can tell you that in The Stand they took two characters and put them together to make one character and skipped entire other characters and things like that, and it's still just so close to the book that it's as being one of my favorite books as well, it's pretty close to my heart. The premise in The Stand is that and I'll try and talk about this with a little bit of sensitivity, considering that the COVID pandemic's going on right now. But the Stand has to do with this super flu. They call it a super flu or tube neck, and they have several nicknames for it. This movie comes from Stephen King's epic novel, The Stand. This was his big white whale, if you will. But so there's this super flu, and everybody's getting it, and so many people are dying, and some people are immune, as is the case in a lot of these apocalyptic films where there's some illness like this. There's this mystery of why are some people okay and everyone else is dying off. But it's a little bit more than that. It gets elevated to sort of a spiritual level in that people start getting this sense and these dreams actually of either they're being drawn to Las Vegas or they're being drawn to Nebraska and then later Colorado for that same group. And basically what you have is a good and evil sort of standoff there where some people are getting a dream to go to Mother Abigail, and then others are getting a dream to go and follow Randall Flagg, who's actually this demon from hell. And I'll be careful not to ruin the entire book, but basically that's what you end up with, is this stand or this standoff between good and evil at the end that isn't necessarily a big fist fight. It's a little more cerebral or spiritual, I guess I should say. But this book and this movie rather are the journey apocalypse. It's the entire story is really about the trip that each individual is taking to get to wherever they're drawn to. And for those of us that like this genre, this is a really, really great one. I'll also add that I think it's December of this year. They have a new version of this movie coming out. I think it's December if it hasn't been backed up because of COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
Gary Sinise, this was I don't believe this was his first role, but I can tell you, Gary Sinise, this was the first time I had seen him personally. Was on this television program.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it being on TV and being like a big event, but somehow I missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually still buy it. I think it was on Prime recently, if it isn't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I watched the trailer, it might even be on Netflix. I watched the trailer and I thought, but who knows? But yeah, they've done a remaster of it. Like they redid all the effects and remastered the footage and everything and added new special effects. Yeah,
and my DVD is from like the early 2000s, so I'm gonna have to rewatch them with the.
Yeah, and it also had Molly Ringwald in it, who of course was in Space Hunter: The Adventures in the Forbidden Zone that we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, it had several people that I'm drawing a blank on their names, but people we actually know better now than I think we probably knew then.
Sure. It is always kind of interesting to kind of go back and see some of the people, like we were talking about Blood of Heroes, going back and seeing Vincent D'Onofrio like very young, and then he was the what was it? He was the main villain in Jurassic World. He was the guy who was training the wanted to use the raptors as weapons or something in Jurassic World. And you just see how people's career and stuff have changed from kind of back then.
Yeah, I imagine for us, it's you watch one of these older movies and you're like, oh, I didn't even remember she was in this.
Oh, absolutely. I do that all the time.
Or I didn't know who she was at this time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I find that's especially true even watching, say, like Star Trek: The Next Generation. You'll watch this and you'll be like, oh my gosh, like she was in that, and like she's a famous, some huge, famous actress or something now.
Right.
It's just like, what? But yeah. I guess that's what you get from being old too. You get to see. Yeah, you get to see everybody.
I haven't gotten there yet. Maybe I'll understand someday.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I shouldn't lump you in that. Although we were talking like we were the same age when we were talking about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and stuff like that, or similar age at least. But
yeah.
But anyway, it's just all a matter of how you feel, right? How you feel. Yeah. All right, so The Stand, maybe one day I'll see it or I'll watch the new one that comes out, hopefully. So the next movie is back to one I put on the list. It is called Steel Frontier from 1995. Had you ever seen or heard of this one?
I have not. You got me again.
Wow. Okay. So Steel Frontier, I'm laughing a little bit, but it is an interesting movie in a number of regards. Kind of the main character is played by Joe Lara, who kind of had a run in some action movies and stuff kind of in the 90s. And he was actually in another post-apocalyptic movie called American Cyborg Steel Warrior, which I didn't put on the list, but that movie is like three kinds of crazy, but it's a ton of fun. But Steel Frontier, basically Joe Lara's character is the kind of the man with no name, or Joe from the Clint Eastwood kind of Fistful of Dollars movies. It's a post-apocalyptic future with fast cars and all this stuff, and he drives a motorcycle, but he is basically like a Western type bounty hunter in this post-apocalyptic world. And I thought that was actually a really good idea. Again, this movie has a few execution problems, but it's kind of the standard plot, which kind of doesn't really help it kind of rise up. There's an evil gang that takes over a town, and our hero, the man with no name, kind of drives those people out of town, and then we find at the end he's basically just collecting bounties on the main evil guy who was wanted. But what makes this movie kind of interesting is I had seen it years ago. I had seen it probably in the 90s, in the mid 90s. Again, it was kind of a video store staple there in the late 90s. And one thing that struck me, because I watched it about a year or so ago again, one thing that struck me about it was that all the car chases and all the crashes, they're all practical stunts, that doesn't, of course, in 1995 or 94 or whenever this was shot, of course, they would have all been practical effects, because you couldn't have afforded to use CGI in your movie for a low budget movie. But I was just kind of really struck by that, because so often today when we see big car wrecks and big things like that in movies, they're all CGI. And these were actually like real cars or real people flying through the air. And that was just kind of, honestly, it was a little refreshing to see that.
Well, also, if you used it back then, I don't think it was quite as good as it is today either. It wasn't as believable as actually flipping that car over, right? Yeah.
No, that is very true. So yes, if they would have spent some money on it, it would have probably wouldn't have been very convincing. But yeah, so I found that one just kind of fun, just seeing some practical effects and stunts, some just real stunt work again. And now sadly, there are a number of shots where you can actually see the stunt, like safety equipment, which is kind of a little frustrating, kind of breaks the spirit of watching the movie a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it is still one of those movies where if you are just kind of chilling out and you want to see some cars crash and some gunfights, it gets it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then actually we had talked about the astronauts before. Actually, the main character and another character have a discussion that they say, actually, astronauts are still up there on the space station, and they can't get down now. And I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of take on the astronaut post-apocalyptic kind of view. It's just that if you're on the International Space Station when the world nukes itself, you're just stuck there now.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was kind of fun. It was just a little fun conversation that they had there. But, all right. So that's Steel Frontier. The next one, you put this on the list. And of course, I have seen it as well. It is Escape from LA from 1996. This is the sequel to Escape from New York that we had talked about in the first episode. Why don't you tell us a little about Escape from LA?
Sure. Yeah, this one is maybe even because of the ending, which I won't blow, but just to intrigue everybody enough to go watch it, is probably an even better post-apocalyptic film because of the final scene of the movie. But so the premise in this one is that a great name for their bad guy is Cuervo Jones, and he's seduced the president's daughter. What's happened in the United States, so we're on the other side of the United States from Escape from New York, of course, and there's this huge earthquake that has happened, and all of these time frames actually match our time frame. So it was like, in 99 or 2000 or something like that, there's an earthquake, and it breaks LA off from the continental US. So it's sort of an island, right? And then later on, looking at my notes now, is in 2013. That's when he seduces the president's daughter, Cuervo Jones does, and she steals this super weapon, and basically hands it over to him because she's fallen in love with him. So that's the job this time for our hero, Snake Plissken. He needs to go in and he needs to get her, I guess, but he's really in there to get that weapon back from all of these terrible people that are living in Los Angeles.
Yeah. And I had seen this at the time when it came out, and and then possibly again in the early 2000s, but I didn't remember much. So actually a few months ago, I went back and I rewatched it, and it is, I guess a good description, like bonkers, maybe. I mean, it has some wild stuff in it, kind of poking fun at Hollywood and things with like the plastic surgeon doctor and things that are just bizarre, kind of poking fun at Hollywood's kind of superficial culture and things like that. Which, but it is an interesting movie. It's a lot of fun. It's John Carpenter and it's Kurt Russell. There you go.
And a few other names like Steve Buscemi. You talked about poking fun at the Hollywood culture.
Yep.
I remember right. His job is he's the map to the stars guy or something.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot. And actually, when I rewatched that, I was like, "Oh, Steve Buscemi," because I didn't remember he was in that one. I remember him from a few other movies in the '90s, like Armageddon and things like that. But I didn't remember he was in that one. But yeah, he's the star map, right? Oh, I'll sell you the maps to go to the stars' houses or whatever.
Which is all rubble, Yeah. They're all destroyed.
Yeah.
I think Carpenter worked with Pam Grier there too.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite movies is what is it? Ghosts of Mars.
Oh, okay.
And she's in that as well.
Okay.
I'm a big Pam Grier fan and Carpenter fan.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people in this, a lot of famous people in this movie. A lot of stuff going on. Yeah, he was making fun of a lot of Hollywood culture and doing a lot of stuff in this. But it is funny. I guess it would probably, if you mention this title to somebody, usually what they remember is Kurt Russell surfing in like a tsunami. That's usually
with Peter Fonda.
Yes, with Peter Fonda of all people. Yes, kind of comes surfing in. So that's kind of one of the images. If somebody's out there is like, maybe I saw this some years back. It's the one where Kurt Russell and Peter Fonda surf a tsunami into L.A. Yeah, that's the movie.
Yeah, that is. It's one of my favorites for this genre. Certainly.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is definitely a movie that should be watched. If you like post-apocalyptic movies, got to see it.
And to push the ending that everybody should want to watch the whole thing and see even more. It's one of my favorite endings to any movie.
Yeah, it does have a really nice twist at the end. Yeah. All right, so yeah, everybody should watch Escape from LA. All right, the next one we had down, I think both of us had this on our list, is Waterworld. Now, I think I got the dates mixed up. This is 95 or 96, either one. So Waterworld is kind of famous, or I perhaps should say infamous, for having been, at the time, the first movie to break $100 million budget. That was the first movie that cost over $100 million to make. Why don't you tell us a little about Waterworld, Ty?
Okay. I don't have any notes on this one, so this ought to be fun. So the apocalypse in this one, this is definitely post-apocalypse. It is a water world. Land to children at this point is a myth, or it's just something in the stories. And everybody lives on these floating cities or travels around on these sailboats. And I think, if I've got my dates right, this was the second movie that Costner did where he decided not to name his hero. The first one being Dances with Wolves, I think falls in those 3 or 4 movies or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't give a direct name or something like that. But
yeah.
In this one, I'm trying to remember if they called him the sailor or the seaman or
the mariner.
The mariner, that's it. So he doesn't have a proper name that you ever hear or anything like that.
Yeah.
But this movie has, you can see why it had such a big budget. I mean, you have everything's on water. That's got to cost more money, and the fight sequences the fight sequences are a lot of fun, and all the bobbing around while they're moving around, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He used himself for bait, folks. He used himself for bait to catch, to get meat from a fish. It was insane.
Yeah. And like you were mentioning that, like he has no name, which actually to me like leads to the best line in the movie when the little girl has been kidnapped and she is telling her captors that this hero, her guardian, is coming to rescue her. One of the captors says like, and what's his name? And she is like, he has no name, so death cannot find him. And I was like, that is the coolest line ever.
That is a great line.
Yeah, I mean, that was just like the coolest line ever. But yeah, sadly, Waterworld, it is a little uneven, and it mixes kind of some cartoony things and some things like, or maybe head scratching moments, like you're watching and you're just like, wait, what? Like what happened? Why did that exactly happen? But it is definitely a fun movie, and you are absolutely right. It is no mystery why it ended up costing so much money. I mean, you're shooting on water the whole time. Most of all of the stunts and things are over water. You obviously you cannot see something in the background. You cannot see land in the background at all. So they had to do all kinds of, crazy things. They had to wait out storms and typhoons and things, I think, if I remember right. So, to get, filming conditions right. And then a lot of people are swimming a lot of the time. So, of course, safety was a big deal, right. Trying to keep everybody safe and that. Just I guess it's a testament to Kevin Costner's star power at that time that he was able to get this movie, and actually another one we're going to talk about, actually get these made, and that they had such big budgets, and like I said, a little uneven. The sheer spectacle of the movie is crazy. I mean, they just do all kind of, like you said, he used himself as bait. They do some insane kind of crazy stuff, but it's definitely, if somebody hasn't seen it, they should check it out. It's I don't know. It's kind of it couldn't really find itself. It had some really nice moments, and then just some other moments that are kind of leave people scratching their heads, I think.
Yeah, but this is another movie that, like you said, the premise is so good, that it's worth the watch. I mean, the idea that dry land is a myth, that people who have a jar full of dirt, that's commerce, that's money because you can plant things in it,
Yeah, no, those were some great concepts. That's what it was just like, there are a ton of great concepts in this movie. And and then there are some nutty things, but it is definitely worth the watch. And if I'm remembering right, there is an extended cut that actually makes the movie make more sense. If you saw the theatrical version, there were a lot of things that were kind of cut out and were kind of jarring. But if you see the extended version, some of the things where you're kind of like, wait a minute, that didn't make any sense. They add some scenes in that just had to be cut for runtime, I believe. And so I don't know if it's called the director's cut, because I think Kevin Reynolds walked off the set because Costner apparently was trying to direct the whole thing, which sounds about right. But it was some other kind of cut. There's some extended cut or something that's available. So try to see that one, I believe. Although I haven't seen this probably now in probably 15 or more years, but definitely an interesting movie. And like you were saying, the concept of the dirt being used as money, and it's just a ton of stuff. And like I said too, I think it's just worth for seeing that one line when that girl delivers that one line about that he has no name, so death can't find him. It's worth watching for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll just move right in because there's a segue because Kevin Costner is back just like 2 years later in 1997. Kevin Costner comes back with The Postman, and we both had this on our lists. The Postman is a very, I don't even know how to describe it. What were your thoughts of The Postman?
Well, it probably colored the way people look at me, actually, because the movie was a huge flop.
Yeah.
But for 10 years, it was easily my favorite movie.
Yeah.
And it's, I believe, the third movie of those Costner films where he never names his main character again. They just call him the Postman.
Yeah.
I think my biggest feeling about the Postman is that it kind of showed that these barest communications will make us feel more like a civilized civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, that's really what it is at the core. I'll give away a little bit of the premise here. Costner's character, the Postman, is really just trying to get a meal. And he happens to find an old mail truck. This is way after this post-apocalyptic, this nuclear war has occurred, and these winters are just carrying on and on and on. And he finds this mail truck, and he's sleeping in it and decides, well, I'm just going to try to deliver this mail at this next town where this truck was obviously headed towards, right? And he just uses that to basically get a night's sleep and some food, and it becomes a job.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes way more elevated than he ever wanted to be, because people regain this connection with the rest of the world. And I think that's my biggest thing, is that human spirit of just being able to connect with friends and family.
Yeah.
A whole story was built around the mail system, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of find this movie infuriating because the first 45 minutes of it is pure genius. It is simply amazing. Like Kevin Costner wandering through this post-apocalyptic landscape with his donkey or a mule. It is genius. And then sadly, the middle and the end to me were just kind of big letdowns for me because Kevin Costner had to cast his kids in it, and some ego things I think took over the story a little bit. But I can definitely see why you would have considered this your favorite movie, because especially if you like post-apocalyptic movies, that beginning part, like those first 45 minutes, I mean, it's a very long movie. It's almost 3 hours long, I think. That first 45 minutes is so incredibly good. Like, there's no dialogue. There's none of this. It's just him wandering through this broken landscape, kind of remembering some things that happened in the pre-apocalyptic world. It is so good. Like, if the whole movie was that, I would say it would be my favorite movie. But sadly, I just thought after such a good, and maybe they cursed themselves, because after such a strong open, I just thought the end was I just thought it was a bit too Hollywood kind of thing. But I do get your point. I mean, I think, of course, it comes from the novel by a science fiction legend, David Brin. That idea of communication and connection, that would be something that is, I think it would be so critical in a post-apocalyptic world, but it hardly gets explored sometimes because I don't know, maybe, some people just don't think about it, or it's boring. But just think, like, even now in this time of the pandemic, what if we didn't have the internet?
Right.
What if we didn't have Zoom and things? Like, we'd be kind of, we'd be so cut off, right? That it would be, it would be ridiculous. It would be, we probably couldn't even do it, right? We probably couldn't even quarantine as well as we do now, because we can call people and we can talk to them, we can message them and text them and things. But if all of that is gone, like, just imagine how cut off from, from friends and family we would be even if they lived, what would be a 20-minute drive or a 30-minute drive away. We would be so cut off with them if we didn't have communication of some kind.
Yeah, I think the isolation would be astounding. And it's the communication that we have today is so intense and so always there in your face that would be a shock to the system.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this movie also lends itself to, is that, it was pretty much this society, although the internet wasn't quite as big in the 90s.
Yeah.
We still could just pick up a phone anytime and call our loved ones. And what would happen if all of that breaks down?
Yeah.
It's kind of what that explores. And I'm not going to defend the movie, but I will say I think the second part of the movie, to me, what I always thought was that it seemed a little more rushed.
Yeah.
Which I see a lot of movies, they're running out of money and they still got to get it done,
Yeah. Yeah. Something, it's almost like visible in the movie, right? Like, or something, because
editing and acting, I think, because you look at scenes where the late great Tom Petty was the mayor of one city towards the end of it. He was playing himself, right?
Yeah.
And the whole acting in that scene seemed awkward.
Yeah. I remember it. Yeah. It was
just a fun scene, but it seemed like maybe they were like, all right, we got to get this done. Run out of time, run out of money, something, right?
Yeah, like something happened. Yeah, something happened because, those first, like I said, first 40, 45 minutes seems so like well crafted and has like such a strong kind of vision to it. Mm-hmm. And then the end, the middle is a little weird. And then the end is just kind of like they were just, okay, we got to, we're almost at 3 hours, wrap it up or something, which that's why I said it kind of infuriates me, because the beginning is so good that it's just like, man, if it could have held that same quality throughout the whole thing, more people would be talking about the Postman today than they do. And really, I think, I did some searching online. It does kind of get ridiculed and stuff, but this movie, you got to watch this movie. If you like post-apocalyptic anything, you got to watch this movie. It is worth seeing. And then, the end's going to be a little bit of a letdown, but man, they really captured what it would be like to kind of wander through the post-apocalyptic wasteland right there at the beginning. All right. I think we have been going on for an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. And we haven't even got to the 2000s. All right, guys. Well, Ty's prediction at the beginning of this episode came true. We went on so long that we had enough for a third part to our post-apocalyptic movie Geek Out. So I really want to thank Ty for coming on the show, and keep an eye out for the post-apocalyptic movie Geek Out Part 3, where we'll pick up in progress. Now, my guest today was Ty Rucker. He is the co-founder of Crypt Monkey Games. I will have links to his website in the show notes for this episode, so you can check that out. And in addition to games, Crypt Monkey Studios is also selling face masks with geeky kind of dragon scales and fire and different things on them during the pandemic. And I will have a link for that as well, so you can check out their geeky face masks. And make sure you stay tuned until part 3 of this post-apocalyptic movie Geek Out. It'll be coming up in a few weeks. Now, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You'll get 10 free dungeon maps. You'll never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you will receive an email update from me letting you know what is going on in the wasteland that is Dice Geeks. Now, I just want to thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully you enjoy this show. I have been doing it for a while now, having a ton of fun, but it is a lot of work. If you like these interviews, it would be awesome if you would support the show in some way. You can like, subscribe, rate, or review the show wherever you are listening to this podcast right now. You can also tell a friend, share it on social media, or you could support the show financially on Patreon at patreon.com/dicegeeks. That would mean the world to me. Now, again, I just really want to thank you so much for listening. And until next Wednesday, keep gaming,